in the last talk on the collective life, that is the last of the collective life. Ideal of human unity, of course, that's it. Not collective life, but ideal of human unity. That will be the summary. Not summing up, but I mean some general observation about this problem. And I wanted to know the relation of collective life and spirituality. That is the first idea you have to bring to your mind. The relation of collective life and spirituality. Because in the past, it was not a direct relation of spirituality and collective life. Collective life was left as, well, going on with some sort of, as best it can, and spirituality was regarded as a special, work or special field for the individual to cultivate, and they never could avoid collective life. However much advanced the individual may be, he lives in a collectivity. And the collectivity does indirectly at any rate influence him. So they try to maintain some sort of standard in collective life by struggle, interest, and so on. Collective life was there, but it was not included as a part of fulfillment of spiritual life. You understand that? The difference is that individual was supposed to be capable of, or individual was supposed to be, fit for, you can say adhikari, means qualified for spiritual life. Collective life was never considered to be a field which was qualified for direct expression of spiritual consciousness. Now, this was a difference, and therefore you find in the past all spiritual efforts mainly directed to individuals, salvation or freedom of the individual or knowledge of the individual. It was ignorance was supposed to be, ignorance of the individual. And collectivity, because of the size probably, was thought that collectivity is not as ignorant as the individual, and then the ignorance of the collectivity one couldn't think of tackling. One easily think of tackling the ignorance of the collectivity. This Aurobindo for the first time, who came and said that, ignorance is not an individual problem, it's a cosmic problem. And then it must concern the collectivity. You cannot let the collectivity go out of the field of ignorance. It is there. And if removal of ignorance or elimination of ignorance is the solution, then collectivity must be included in the solution. You understand the relation between spiritual life and collectivity is direct in that sense. That if ignorance is a problem, it's not individual. This was one of the great mistakes which Buddhism committed. You see, they thought that the problem of suffering was individual. The problem of suffering was collective. And the removal of collective pain or suffering cannot be effected by withdrawal from life, because life in its very constitution is something that will always want to live, because life feels automatically or instinctively that the end it has to attain by living is delight. Cannot prevent life from the will to live. People have talked about will to live without fully understanding it. Will to live is charged with this supra-rational impulse of will to live life. You see, it is there all the time. In the midst of intense suffering, the will to delight is there. Now that you cannot get out. And secondly, collectivity also is an entity. That was not fully realized by the past, thinkers, philosophers, and yogis. That collectivity is an entity. And collectivity is the expression of this cosmic being taking the form of nation unit or social unit or race unit, but the unit is alive, and unit is a personality of the collective being, the universal being. Therefore, if you have the problem of elimination of ignorance from life, you cannot leave out the collectivity from the operation of any new light that is going to operate in humanity. If a new light is going to operate and help humanity, it is not only on the individual scale, but also it will have to operate on the collective scale. You see? And collectivity will have to be included. In this process, he traced the growth of the collectivity, what we may call the evolution of the collectivity from small to bigger and bigger and bigger rising units, till now It is on the threshold of realizing the highest possible collective unit on earth, mankind. It is now on the threshold of realizing the highest possible realizable unit of collective life, humanity. It is standing on that. And then he says, he traces side by side not only the life process of the collectivity, but the psychological process of the collectivity. That the collectivity is not merely a life growth, but a psychological growth. It is not merely that men have built up larger and larger collectivity to satisfy life impulse, ambition or selfishness only. It has played a very determinant part and very definite part, that is true. But the drive of collectivity has been to grow from smaller and smaller to larger units, and with the growth of the larger units, every time an effort is made to bring in a psychological factor to govern the collective life. The growth has not been merely in size. Growth has not been only to meet the demands of life on the plane of desire or ambition only. That has been the guiding force. That has been the main motive force. But side by side, other values of life also have been brought into dynamic movement by the growth of collectivity. And he is pointing out that now that the collectivity is standing on the threshold of realizing its highest unit, it must bring into dynamic movement the deepest spiritual entity in man, the psychic soul of man. You see, it must be an operation or a result of a movement of his deepest entity. You understand? Yeah, that's the double movement you have to march. Small unit to large, to the largest, and from primitive state of infra-rational society to rational to supra-rational. Well, we are coming to that point now. Yes, concept of collective life is posited as universal. Now, if because no one who is a serious thinker and who thinks of giving a solution for world problem can ignore the and avoid the collective being. You see, it is there. Even a man like T.S. Eliot, who is not directly concerned, but he's concerned with culture, he has to say in one of his poems, I think Chorus is from the Rocks, I think that is one of his poems. He says, when a stranger says, what is the meaning of this city? I'm quoting from T.S. Eliot to show you how this collective problem cannot be left out even by, artists or poets and so on. It affects the whole being. You cannot leave it out. When a stranger says, what is the meaning of this city? Do you huddle close together because you love each other? What will you answer? He is asking, you see, the modern man. What will you answer? Will you say, for instance, we all dwell together to make money from each other? Or this is a community? Will you answer that this is a community? Well, in which case, quite other factors will have to be, considered. There is no life that is not lived in the community. And no community not lived in praise of God. And that is what even Toynbee feels at the end of his study of whole world's history in detail, that trans-rational reality or being has been felt by men in his social and collective life and intensely realized by individual in his effort and so on. You find that this idea which T.S. Eliot gives here, that always the individual has lived in a community, collectivity. And the collectivity has always lived in praise of God. It may be, the medicine man's, some miraculous power that surrounds him. But something more than human has been always, accepted by the collectivity as something to which it can look up for its guidance. You see, this has been from the beginning of human history, even as old as the Vedic concept which we have already dealt with when we were beginning the talk. You remember? I gave you the cosmic being, the Vishwa Purusha, of which the Rig Veda speaks as a reality behind the collective life. You see, this Vishwarupa, 1,000-headed being with 1,000 eyes and 1,000 hands and so on. Well, that is the conception of a reality which is behind the collective life of man. Well, But man is not yet developed sufficiently, and he acts in life in the collectivity in obedience to his impulses, to his interests, to his passions, to his desires, to his likings, ambitions, and that leads to conflict between individuals and groups. And then a code of behavior is evolved in collective life, a social morality, some standard of life, and that is for protection of society, as we have already seen in one or two of our talks, you see. And it is only secondarily this social standard is imposed on men by state authority when it goes to the extent of criminality. Otherwise, society tries to restrict the individual by social code, by standard of life and conduct and behavior, rules of behavior which are unwritten but still sufficiently pressing to make man behave well in society. And when it goes to a little more extreme, well, the state is brought in to enforce, this kind of standard or law. Collective life as a field of living ethical values is a very good training. But the question is, what is the purpose of this collective life? And what is its fulfillment? With regard to that we are concerned here. And ethics was taken up by some thinkers in the past and even in the present. I think Russell's first book also is Social Reconstruction and so on. Many thinkers today have been what they call social philosophers or social thinkers. They direct all their philosophy to reconstitution, to remaking of society, as to how to remake, what would be the form that it would take. Now, ethics is there, and we have dealt with ethics only yesterday, so I do not want to go back upon that ground. Ethics as a directive force in collective life, particularly in politics, you see. Now, this brings to the question also of interpretation of history, because that is what it means ultimately. What is collective life ultimately meant to lead to? What is the significance of collective life? What is its fulfillment? When you put these questions, then it means it comes to the interpretation of history. One may try to read the possible significance of collective life from history, from study of history. Imperfect though the record of history may be, but historical development might give us some indication of the line towards which this is tending, towards which collective life is leading. And in this respect, I think I did mention once Oswald Spengler, one German writer before the First World War in 1912, I think, published a book called The Decline of the West. 2 volumes and very well, very good, serious study of history. And then he tried to make out that history is a development of cultural life of man, which comes to a culmination for 2000 years about, and then it goes down. Culture has its beginning, its rise, and its end, decline. And the cycle is of 2000 to 2500 years. That is the cycle he traced out from study of his history. And he then went further to read now significance. This is how he tried to read history. The 2000 to 2500 years is a period of cultural, rise and decline. And after that, it must decline, and it is old and finished, and it cannot be brought to life. And therefore, he read that there is destiny at work in history. That curve of movement of collective life is fixed. It is like a thing that must go up and down, and 2005 years must inevitably, it's like a rule, you see. It is destiny at work. And by destiny, it didn't mean something fixed, but he wanted to say that time has a direction. When we think of time, we think of only objective time, that watch. But time is not the watch. Time is a tendency operative at the present moment. And this present movement of time has tendency, as you call it, tension. The movement of time in man's life is full of tension. It tends towards certain thing, it is against certain thing, for certain thing. So that to say that time is objective and time has no, elements which influence the course of event is not right. It's already active all the time. And it has a tendency, and you can predict, according to Ostwald, that it will move towards this direction. And he said, from that point of view, West must decline. That was the conclusion. And then the Western culture has finished this route 2,500 or 2,000 years, and now it must go down. Well, at least the war broke out, and it was seen that the Western culture did realize its imperfection, if not well down. It did find that it was not at the top of human culture and that it was not the highest culture man had produced. It was powerful. Power is one aspect of culture, naturally. Organization is another aspect. Economic life and safety of life and law and order and intellectual progress of scientific organization or scientific discovery is a great contribution, there is no doubt. But power, order, organizations are not the very, very highest elements in it. There is one element which is great. But there are so many other elements required if culture is to be a perfect culture. And yet, man has not produced a perfect culture. No nation or no collectivity has produced a perfect culture. So, we are thinking of this Oswald Spengler's, and is, well, it's one interpretation. Now, in his vision, now we are coming to Sri Aurobindo's vision, you see. There you find an interpretation of history which is different from all the others up till now, and it is done in a short compass. Therefore, people do not realize how profound it is, because people think that history is a long span, you see, from beginning of time to 7,000 years nearly. Historical time is about 7,000 years at the most. We don't know. 5,000, 2,000 years is the maximum that we know. You see, even Christ is semi-historical in the sense that he did exist, and we know that he was historical. He was not a mythical figure. We know Buddha was a historical figure 2,500 years. You see, Socrates was a historical figure 2,600 years BC, before Christ. So you go back upon time, you find exact history up to about 3,000 BC. You see, before that, well, you have conjecture, you have hypothesis, you have archaeology, you have all kinds of conjectural reading of human history, and still when you go further they will say there was no life, and then the millions and millions of years of geological life, and then the vegetable life, and then the rocks and the earth and earthquakes and heat and light and all kinds of things taking place. And well, that is all conjectural history. It may be true, I don't say that it's not true, that's a way of looking at it. But the point is, history of man is not very old, about 5 to 7,000 years at the most. And you can go back safely up to 3,000. After that, you are in the realm of conjecture, you see. Now, therefore, men think that 7,000 years in small volume like that. Arnold Toynbee is like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Greek time, this time, Egypt, Palestine. Oof, really, it is encyclopedic work, heavy, tremendous work. But you see, it is like a man who goes about doing things, and if somebody gets at the root of the problem, well, he can give you the thing in a nutshell. He says that is what it means. It is such a profound reading of human growth, of collective life, that people have escaped it simply because it passes over their heads. It is. Is this in the book Human Unity, or is this in Human Cycle? Two, both of them are studies. Both of them are profound studies of the growth of collective life and the meaning of history, significance of man's collective life. If you want to know what is history, what history should mean, well, you get it there, direct, straight, and based on fact. It's not merely theory that, all the time talking of philosophy. He talks about German groups, about Slav groups, about, Saxons, Anglo-Saxon, Teutons, Norse, Russians, Slavs, and he doesn't talk about infinity, transcendent, universal, and individual. No. It is history. As it has passed, only in its essence. Racial soul he has caught hold of, and then he makes you read the racial soul, that's all. He is not concerned with all the so many details and all, that's how he catches the profundity of human history. Now here, in his vision, we have seen already in Life Divine that it's an omnipresent reality which is present in the three positions of life. We have seen that takes three positions of transcendental, universal, and individual. It is one, identical. And the collective life of man finds its place as an evolutionary movement of the universal reality. The universal aspect of the omnipresent reality finds expression in collective life. So the dynamic aspect of evolution of the universal is there in the collective life. You see, it is so intimately related with his vision of life and reality. You see, the omnipresent reality is triple or has three positions which it seems to take to our mind: a transcendental, universal, individual. And the collective life is expression of this individual in evolutionary movement, so that it evolves from small to greater and greater units, giving rise to or dynamically carrying out in its organization a trial of higher and higher psychological factors. You see, that is how we have to read history. Now, in fact, yes, this drive towards collective life is not a special feature confined to the human race, as we have already seen. Formation of collective life is not a special quality or special power of the human group or human race. That is how it is concerned with the whole organization of the universe, you see. The animal and the insect world have the same trend. The beehive and the anthill are typical examples of perfectly organized societies. In fact, human society can learn a lesson from it, because human society is not perfect at least as the collection of bees or anthill. They are more organized. You see, everyone knows this function and fulfills it without any outer guidance, because it's instinctive. The same impulse extends not only to the vegetable world, where orders and classes are found, but goes down deep even into the so-called inconscient matter, where infinitesimal particles are seen to form aggregates. Particles of atom forming aggregates is the beginning. So it goes down to the basic, constitution of earth. Collectivity is a term of this cosmos, of the earth life, and it does not begin with human being. Human being need not take unnecessary pride to think that he is one in whom the collective life has evolved and everything else had no chance. No, it goes right up to the constitution of matter. Yes. Now, in case of man, his collective life is seen by Sri Aurobindo as an evolutionary, movement starting from small units, tending to create ever larger and larger aggregates. That is how he sees. The family, the first unit of collective life, was not based on economic but on psychological factors in man's nature. And today, man has attained the nation as the largest unit of his collective life. Now, as we have seen already, that individuality or individual and the collective are both terms of the transcendent according to the vision of life divine, you see. And therefore, collective life of man finds a place in the scheme of his integral perfection of the human being. Because Sri Aurobindo's idea is how man is to attain perfection. What kind of perfection he is going to attain? And will it be only individual or collective? So he says it's a double perfection, individual as well as collective. And it is not a problem. Therefore, it's not a problem. It is not a problem that concerns only the individual. Collectivity also is a field for ignorance, and in that case, the problem when the individual realizes his fundamental divinity or essential divinity and makes it dynamic, then it would lead him to realization of collective perfection. Now we come back to what is the nation. What is the nation? Is it merely a geographical unit of land, or a sum of smaller units, family and societies and small groups? Or is it only a binding together by economic interest, political interest, or common tradition, common ideas? Very often you find that a nation is evolved irrespective of these things, except the land, which is really the basic material support for the whole, national consciousness. But otherwise in Switzerland you find that there is a variation. And it has not affected the formation of the nation unit. From his point of view, each nation, he says, is a power or Shakti of the evolving spirit of humanity. And each nation lives by that principle which it embodies. When it becomes incapable of embodying that principle, well, the nationalism dies, nation dies. You see? Yes, that is the vitality, real psychological vital factor of the nation. Where such a national consciousness is living and awake, the nation is able to regenerate itself even from adverse external conditions like foreign political domination. Even when it is dominated by a foreign nation politically, if the national consciousness is living and awake, well, the nation is able to rejuvenate itself. Mere domination does not kill the national spirit. It is there all the time. But when nation proves unfaithful to that quality or that power which it is supposed or which is given to represent in the spirit of humanity, the principle is given up, well, then the nationality dies. Then it no more lives afterwards. You see, you take, if you want in a rough illustration, you can say the Egyptians, for instance, or the Greek. There was something which came down at the time when Greeks gave to the world, gave to Europe particularly, and through Europe to the whole world, this great European culture. The root of European culture, the essence is in Greece. Now Greece, if you study, well, Greece is not there. That Greece of Socrates and Plato, of Themistocles and the people who could organize that small number of states into a powerful cultural unit with dynamism, well, that Greece is gone. Because perhaps the Greeks could not remain faithful to that spirit which they were supposed to embody. In fact, the spirit having passed to Europe almost, the life from Greek also passed. The same has happened to Egyptian culture. Egyptian culture must have been at one time very living culture, because the monuments that are there and the tradition that seemed to persist for 5,000 years about. Well, Egypt went through so many metamorphoses, so many changes, that perhaps from today's Egypt to judge that Egypt would be rather difficult. Only in some races you find that this continuation of cultural current, the embodiment, the principle which it is supposed to embody as a nation, comes down without, being completely given up. It changes, but it retains its life. It goes on changing according to the changing conditions of the time. And Italy, Greece, and Poland were under foreign domination, but they freed themselves because consciousness of the nation was awake in them. And the struggle for freedom in Ireland, in India, when the struggle was on, the demand for freedom was not based upon economic and political rights only. They did not say that we want more posts in the government, or we want more commerce, or we want to be independent in economics. No. Or we want only political freedom. The demand was on the need of freedom to express the national soul. That was their cry. You can read even now the articles written by Irish patriots in those days, or Indian people. The idea was that a good government is not a substitute for self-government. The idea was that if the British governed well, then the answer was that good government is no answer to self-government. Self-government is for the expression of the national soul. A good government is where somebody manages the household very well, but it's not the family. Isn't it? So it's quite a different thing, psychological entity. So on the need of freedom to express the national soul. This brings us to the one basic, two or three basic principle: omnipresent reality originating from cosmic or universal consciousness, a, the whole human collective soul embodying itself in certain principles in the different nation groups, and nation a living entity. That far we come. You understand? Nation a living entity. Now the question is relation between collectivity and individual. This has been one problem of discussion and thinking for the last about 50 years, if not more. What is the relation of the collectivity and the individual? Theories or philosophies or outlook have a reason in which the relation has been that of opposition. There was a time when there was uh, complete organic life where there was no opposition even felt. At a time, there was a time when society completely dominated the individual without the individual resisting in the least, because society was in the infra-rational stage, and therefore the individual has not come to his own, and he was quite happy to be governed by the law of the group, by the pack, as you would say. He was quite happy to be. He was feeling big enough, say that he didn't feel that he was small. In fact, he felt he was the society. He was a part of the society, and he held up the standards of the collective life, and therefore was regarded as regarding the whole collectivity as if something better to look up to. It is when the individual came to his own that the problem has become more acute. And then the relation between group and the individual has been problem of study and action. Now here you find the relation between this. There are people who are overcome by the size of the collectivity. You are impressed and they think that collectivity is big, individual is small. Collectivity seems to be more lasting. Individual passes after 50 or 60 years. Collectivity continues. Therefore, they said that collectivity now has a right, has a priority, and it should be the function of the collectivity to dictate to the individual. At least the individual should try to live up or live for the collectivity. He should not try to seek individual fulfillment. This is the basis of people who try to put a philosophy or an outlook of social life in which collectivity is regarded as of greater importance than the individual. That is one. As a corollary, then, they draw the conclusions afterward. Therefore, the individual must seek fulfillment in the collectivity. Collectivity is the wider life of the individual, and greater than that, there is none. Therefore, well, if he does not understand and does not, live for the collectivity, it's for the collectivity to see that the individual lives for the collectivity. Well, then immediately you are on the threshold of opposition or conflict between the individual and collectivity. Outlook of socialism and communism is based upon this philosophy or this thinking that relation between the individual and the group is that of opposition and conflict, and it must always be so. Now, this is fundamentally something which strikes against the progress of both of the individual and the collectivity, because individual stopped from progressing by the pressure of the collectivity, and the progress of the collectivity is hampered because no new element can be added to the collective life except through free individuality. If the individual is not free, well, it is the collectivity that starves. You see, the collectivity ultimately starves because the individual is not free and can't rise to his full stature. So all the outlook, we see this opposition. And big size should not blind us to the fact that collectivity is not perfect because it is big. All the imperfections of the individual are there in the collectivity. If individual has desire, so has collectivity, its own collective desire. If individual is egoistic, collectivity also is egoistic. If individual is ambitious, the collectivity is ambitious. Because it is big size, it is not therefore sacrosanct. It does not acquire a greater sanctity, so to say, or a greater power of imposing its will on everybody else. Both are imperfect. And secondly, the values which collectivity evolves also are not perfect because they are only transitory and passive. Standards which collective life sets up standards of right, standards of religion, standard of morality, standard of ethics, you see, standard of good. Well, all those standards, you go back 100 years and you find what was bad there is now regarded as very good. What was regarded as good there is regarded now very bad. So, you see, the standard which have governed the life of collectivity in different periods of human growth have not been constant because no standard can be constant. They have to go on changing. Therefore, society to claim a priority on the right that it is dictating values to the individual, well, it's only temporary passing values, it is provisional. And there is no permanency about the standards which it creates for its governance or for its conduct, for its dealing. Well, and the solution in which the collectivity seeks to crush the individual is the one solution, Sri Aurobindo says, which would thwart its very purpose. If the collectivity by any means reduces the freedom of the individual, well, that is a social philosophy which is bound ultimately to fail because the roots of progress are in the individual. The individual is the seat of the omnipresent reality, remember that. Yes. And then if you crush the individual, you are trying to smother the omnipresent reality in him. And it is that reality which can see the truth beyond the collective life, beyond the mistakes of the collective life, beyond the ignorance of the collective life. It is the vision of the individual that rises to a conception of truth, of justice, of perfection, of attainment, in fact, of fulfillment of man. And when a man tries to make or makes an effort for spiritual fulfillment, it is only as you can say, when you send out the soldiers in front, what do you call them? It is a advance guard, is it not? Huh? Yes, it is the advance guard of the whole race. When the individual claims and tries and succeeds in attaining a spiritual fulfillment, it is avant-garde, it is the advance guard of the whole human race. It only shows that humanity is capable. There cannot be an isolated achievement of the individual which the race cannot have. It may not be that today you cannot have. Just as flying and going into the interstellar space is now done by only 2 or 3 nations, but it is a right of the whole humanity one day, is it not? It's the achievement of the human spirit. First, when a thing is done, it appears as if it is for the privileged minority. But when people realize what it means an advance for all. There is no privileged minority; they can retain the privilege forever. When car was first made, perhaps very few people were able to go in for it. And now you see that it can be for all. So it's the same thing happens for spiritual life. It is the advance guard of the whole human race. And when you stop the advance guard, well, you stop the march of the whole. You are smothering the march of the whole race. And that is why Sri Aurobindo says that any outlook of social reconstruction in which the individual is crushed or individual's liberties, compromised or limited or threatened, will threaten the roots of progress of the whole collective life. Well, yes. But then we will say that Sri Aurobindo said that an omnipresent reality is at work. But in collective life, at least, we don't see omnipresent reality. We see conflict, we see division, we see separation, we see interest clashing, and everywhere, in fact, division, disharmony, and conflict. So he says this is philosophical. If you go, it's due to the mind. But we are not going to take the discussion on philosophical basis. This is due, if you watch carefully, is due to the fact that each individual, instead of functioning as one center of the universal, acts and behaves as if he was a center of the universe. The one in many, diversity in oneness, is already operative. It is the basic, principle of cosmic life. Matter is one, well, its manifestation is infinitely multiple. Energy is one, its forms are various. Life is one, its forms are multiple. So that Diversity in oneness is the basic dynamic principle. And therefore, when you say the omnipresent reality is working, you should not expect uniformity. The identical is not immutable. The identical is not a monotone of changeless sameness. Otherwise, you will be going for, as he says in Life Divine, a monotone of changeless sameness incapable of variation. That is not unity. There is, in fact, infinite multiplicity of the one, infinite multiplicity of the one, and eternal unity of the many. That is the basic truth, you see. Oneness is everywhere, differentiation is everywhere. Oneness is everywhere. So you take the whole vegetable world, oneness is there as a vegetable expression of life in the trees. But differentiation is also everywhere. No two trees are the same, and no two leaves of the same tree are the same. And so the differentiation also is that the impulse of differentiation is at the root of individuation. You see, it is necessary as a play on the unity or on the oneness. Oneness is a basic security. Multiplicity is the same oneness, but finding itself infinitely. Multiplicity is the same oneness which finds itself infinitely. It is really an inexhaustible, diverse display of unity. Inexhaustible, diverse display of unity. And we see this double element in man's nature also when you observe his life. There is conflict, division, and struggle and strife and so on, because man has got in him ego asserting and ego enlarging impulses, is it not? Ego asserting and ego enlarging impulses are there in man, which lead to this conflict and the division and the struggle. But also there are other cooperation, sympathy, sacrifice, also at work simultaneously, so that there are ego exceeding and ego destroying impulses also present in man, which stress that unity in behavior. Those ego exceeding and ego destroying impulses which find expression in actual life are the sign that the oneness is operative. Oneness is not static or absent, you see. They are the sign of the unity in its dynamic aspect. When the sense of unity becomes dynamic, the individual tries to exceed the ego formula. It's a way of his asserting unity. When he goes beyond his ego, breaking out into unity, you see. And he stands as a representative of the whole, so to say, of the group, and identifies himself with the consciousness of the group, widens out with the consciousness of the nation. He can widen out to the nation, the consciousness of the whole human race, like a Buddha. You see? So there are in man ego asserting and ego enlarging impulses. At the same time, ego exceeding and ego destroying impulses also indicate the dynamic nature, the active force which is at work of that unity, which indicates the dynamic aspect of the unity at work. And then, so if you watch the course of human development, of the collective life of man, you find it seems to have gone through three stages: infra-rational, rational, and possibly supra-rational. Infra-rational stage of society is past, where even religion was infra-rational. Morality was also infra-rational, not rational, based on some understanding which was instinctive rather than intellectual or rational. the collective life has passed through these stages of infra-rationality and it has been now dominated by rationality. We are in the rational stage. And if we study life, says Aurobindo, you will see that life does not seek the rational. Life seeks the absolute. Life is not interested only in rationality. Reason wants to control life, which is quite another thing. This has happened, that will come when we take up the human cycle. You will see that that is not now the subject matter. We cannot divert our attention, you see, but the fact is that if you look at life, either individual or collective, it is not seeking the rational. The flow of life is irrational, is it not? I mean, life, you can't say life is, take any movement of life, take love. Love is not rational in its origin, first of all. It's not rational at all. And it is not trying to compartmentalize itself into rational, movement, and it throws itself for the infinite, for the absolute. That is love. Otherwise, it's not love. It is calculation. It's not love at all. So you see, take any movement of life and you see that it is not making for the rational, it's not seeking the rational. No. Life is seeking the infinite and the absolute. Yes. So that you have to take into consideration the evolution of collective life. That collective life is now, well, thinkers want to dominate by reason and by logic and say, oh, we must cut it to this pattern. We must logicize it, we must organize it, economic life, then department, compartment, division, and absolutely rational. Get up in the morning, do this, do this, do this, do this, come back, do this. That is all right, so far as mind is concerned. Life says, I am not satisfied. Why should I go morning to night working like a slave? What am I going to get? You understand? That's the difficulty. What am I going to get at the end of all this bother? Again, the same ground. It's a most dull, mechanical, and uninteresting round of life. So it's not seeking, and it will never be satisfied by any dictate of reason, however perfect that organization may be. Reason may be very happy to give a very perfect structure or constitution, say this mold, what a wonderful and marvelously rational and satisfying mold. But that is satisfying to the reason, not to life. And this is not seen by many people, and they're trying to impose from mind, a pattern on life, which life does not accept. It takes for some time and says, all right, let us see this new. And afterward immediately leaves it behind and says, oh, that it, throw it out. That is what has been happening throughout the course of history. Now he says, life shows that it does not seek the rational, but the supra-rational, or the infinite and the eternal or absolute. Life is in fact itself imprisoned supra-rational. Life itself is not something small like that, and it is itself imprisoned supra-rational, and therefore it wants to break out the prison of mere matter, of rationality, and merge into or bring into its experience or in its life or in its constitution something which is beyond the ken of reason, beyond the power of reason to give. Even economy, he says, is not merely seeking for the satisfaction of personal desires and comforts. He's showing that life, when it creates economic organization, is not only seeking for personal desires and comforts, but it is meant to remove poverty and squalor from mankind when it seeks its true aim. It will widen out into that which is more than reason can understand and follow. Well, life seeks the absolute and not the rational. That part of it we have done. And now a little bit more, which is a big bit, but anyway, we have to tackle it. Now, actually, we regard this is the metaphysical part or reading of history. You can say philosophy of history in one sense, in a way, the basic outlook or principles by which we should look at the growth of collective life of man. Now, collective life, but if we look at the actual situation, then we have to find out the actual remedy. He says in the organization of collective life of nations, you see that it is dominated by vital ego of the collective life up till now. In actual situation, the national life of the whole race of different nationalities is governed by, the vital ego, not by her deepest soul of the race. The soul of the collectivity is the governing the life of the collectivity is the vital ego, just as in the individual also. It is his desires and his impulses and ambition and greed and selfishness that governs his life. And when he is an exceptionally developed individual, mind or intellect or principle or some philosophy, or if he is a man of heart or developed conscience, man of character, but they are a small number. The major portion of human individuality is governed by vital life, desire, impulse, and almost just a little beyond animal level. Nations have not been governed by their deepest soul. It is in Europe that the nation units were first organized, and all of them are dominated by this economic outlook, greed, and political ambition. That is the fact of human history. You see, that is how you read human history. You don't go into bother in detail. You get at the bottom of what was moving the collectivity, and then you get at the essential factor, you see. The organization of nation unit took place around the vital ego of the collective life. And that inevitably led to clashes, as we know, with other collective egos, culminating in two devastating world wars. If the vital ego leads the nation, hardly any other result has to be expected. So the one thing one has to see is that how to limit this operation of the vital ego in the collective life of man today. That is the problem. Yet, paradoxical though it may sound, the universal nature seems to be pressing forward. Simply because a clash has come, universal nature doesn't seem to be thwarted or doesn't seem to have think that she has come to a standstill. She's pressing forward to the unity of mankind, notwithstanding not only the world wars but world problems. The only unit of collective life which remains to be achieved is mankind. Once the unity of mankind is attained, a major step will have been taken towards human perfection. Because to realize that unity, man will have to, get rid of so many, imperfect elements before that becomes a fact. And we have seen three factors already which are driving toward this culmination. Scientific progress that has reduced time and space and helped in removing outer barriers between man and nation and nation. Drive towards economic unification, second factor, throughout mankind. Collective life of man today all over the world centers around economy, and far greater economic interchange is taking place today between nations and nations than at any other time in human history. Remember that great fact. It is planned economical interchange on a gigantic scale. It's not accidental, planned economic interchange on a gigantic scale. And third factor is increasing stress on socialism. These three factors are driving the human race toward that unity. Socialist pattern, as it is often called, in the organization of collective life throughout the world. Now, Bertrand Russell, in his sixth broadcast from London, Living in an Atomic Age, proposed that by a rational utilization of atomic energy, it is possible to solve the problem of humanity. Whether this is only side issue, but still we can consider it because we are trying to see what can solve the problem of collective life of man and what can bring about unity. Now, here this is a very imperfect reading, you see. It is a very partial view of the problem, in fact, to believe that adjustment or rational utilization of atomic energy would bring about, by its mere application, this unity of mankind, because unity is psychological. It has nothing to do with application of energy to industrial production. The problem is psychological. The problem is the change in the nature of man. Problem is not merely giving him so many kilowatts every day so that afterwards he has not to complain and you get your energy free or with 1 cent every day and you're enough to live your life. That will not solve problem. Conflict will remain. Disharmony will remain. A man will not feel his fulfillment because he is able to get atomic energy very cheap or free for the matter of that. A man will not feel his fulfillment because he is able to get atomic energy very cheap or free for the matter of that. No. He seems to think that the problem is only external. He traces the evolution of man up till now and puts it in three heads. That's how he divides. Man versus nature. That's one. Man versus man. Two. And third is man divided in his own self. This is his analysis. I am giving roughly his 6 long talks which he gave on broadcast from BBC in London, you see. But the analysis of it will show that he is trying to stress that his reading of history from scientific point of view now, just as Marx read it from the economic point of view, and Spengler read it from the destiny point of view, and Bertrand Russell now reads it from the scientific point of view. And he says man versus nature, man versus man, man divided in itself. Now, man versus nature, man is one. Man is now master of nature. Man versus man, well, it is because of his incapacity to divide, the material wealth or product of the earth that man versus man is there. And man versus man is there because man is divided in his own self. He has a sense of imperfection and sin which he need not have. Man is divided in his own self and says, "Oh, I am something bad. I have a sinful entity in me." And it is this sinful entity which he projects outside in his enemies, you see, and thinks that what is very bad in me is just that enemy, you see. Now, I don't know how to call this psychology. He's supposed to be a very great thinker. And it seems so very primitive thinking about human psychology that I hesitate to pronounce a very strong opinion about it, you see. But really, it is too much simplification of a tremendously complicated problem. If he thinks that this is the way in which human problem can be solved, well, I think that he's living on a plane where he's absolutely unconscious of the dimensions of the problem. I must frankly confess. He doesn't feel the dimensions at all. He thinks, oh, there's atomic energy, you take it, and what is there now? Atomic energy? Well, power was already there. Poverty was removed at many points, and yet man did not become perfect. There were periods and parts of humanity where poverty is not there, where unemployment is not there, where man is not lacking energy. I mean, employment of energy for production. And you can see that neither the individual nor that collectivity is perfect. It doesn't require a seer or a spiritual figure to know that. You see, it is very simple. The ABC of the observation of life today, that where there is a complete organization of life on economic basis, perfection has not been produced. You see? The first of these, man versus nature, is a half-truth, because nature is not always antagonistic to man. Tagore is more correct when he says that the effort to divide man and nature is artificial, like dividing the plant from the flower. Man is a flower, after all, you can't divide. You see, and is therefore wrong. It is nature that supports man. It is nature that gives him food, water, and air. And even when she seems to oppose him, it is to bring out the potential powers of man, which might lead him to conquer her. That's why in some of the meetings I used to say that nature is like a bride that wants to be won. That's all. She is not opposing simply because she wants to thwart. No, she wants that man should win her. Well, therefore, besides many problems over and above economics, there are many more problems than economics and politics to be solved before collective perfection can be envisaged. Russell's third point about self-division of man's consciousness into two parts. Well, this doesn't seem to be founded on psychological basis proper. It is far from true to say that man projects sin from within himself onto his enemy. The enemy is not sin personified. At least no soldier in any of the last wars ever thought so. Because I know some German and English soldiers who never believed that all English or all German was only sin. I don't think it is too puerile to believe. After the two world wars, there have been efforts to create larger than nation units. And the British Commonwealth, the French Entente or French family, and formation of the vague Arab League, and several other efforts at creating supranational units of collective life. Nation units have been overpassed, and more than nation units have been attempted. But in the day to day flow of events, one hardly sees the sign that might encourage an optimistic outlook towards human unity. Difficulties seem to be Himalayan. The highest realized unit of international unity, the United Nations UNO, is divided into two ideological camps. Now look at the actual picture of the world, I mean unity of mankind as far as it has gone. And Cold War is already in progress in Korea and Berlin, and perhaps in Laos. China is divided into two parts. Laos is the battleground for two rival powers, and German unification is not yet in sight after 13 years of end of war. Tibet is swallowed by China, and India is border is threatened by China and Pakistan. Portugal and India, South Africa and free world have very little in harmony. Last but not least, the UNO's initial policy in Congo does not seem to have borne any fruit. Very discouraging picture in one sense, how human unity. But on the other hand, signs indicate that there is a progress achieved towards human unity, and there is no necessity of taking a very too pessimistic a view. We have seen that during the Second World War, Mr. Churchill, you can't say that he is not a statesman and he is not one who knows international politics. Mr. Churchill actually had proposed a common citizenship between France and England. This is from last war only, you see. It was symptomatic of the drive towards unity of mankind. The very fact that it could be put with seriousness during a great crisis in a nation's life shows the direction towards which nations have to move to solve that problem of collective life. You know that when Paris fell, that was a proposition which Churchill made to France, and France refused. Yeah. And the idea could be, and if the idea could be entertained in wartime, far more easy it should be to make it a success during peace. A common citizenship of mankind, why not? At least multiracial citizenship. A man could be a citizen of more than one nation, why not? Yes. Well, the unique fact of Indian political independence also brings in new factors in international politics and contributes to the growth of collective life towards human unity. Because the political movement in India stressed the importance of ethical ideals and ethical, forces as a directive of collective life of man. Economical and political factors were subordinated to the ethical. This was the great contribution of Indian struggle for freedom. That economic and political considerations were there, but they were subordinated to the ethical. You see, non-violence was stressed even in preference to economic and political considerations. Now, and it has put this new instrument in the hand of unarmed nations that are struggling to be free. Another fact also is the influence which Free India has exerted in international life, or is exerting, quite disproportionate to our economic and military strength. Quite disproportionate, because militarily India is perhaps not even the fourth power, you see. And economically, I think she would stand for 20th or 25th nation in the world. She is very backward and poor. Yes. It seems that the age of economy and military domination is passing from international life. It almost looks if a poor nation and militarily not equipped well, if it can exert such a force in international life, by its ethical pressure, it seems then, therefore, that the age of economic and military domination is passing from international life, and slowly ethical ideals, justice, equality, freedom, self determination, are actively taking its place. Up to the end of the 17th century, the nations defeated had to face the ruin not only of their political but also their economic life by paying penalty for the war, is it not? And it was the discovery of the First World War when they put the German to pay the price for the First World War. They found out that Dawes' plan had to be given up because it wouldn't work. The compensation or the indemnity which Germany was made to pay, or calculation was made that she must pay so much indemnity. While Germany said, I will pay. Then I must earn in order to pay. Very simply, it's like a one individual. You see, I can pay your debt, I must earn. Then if I am allowed to earn, well, you say that no, you can't earn because if you come in our markets, then we won't sell our goods. So if I can't earn, how can I pay? That is why moratorium had to be admitted that, all right, we don't want to take anything from you because we will be starving. If we get money from you, our industries will have to stop. And you alone will be doing something, is it not, and selling in the markets. And we will only be sitting and getting money. And that's the way, then our people will be afterward not only become idle, but we will become backward. You will make a good economic progress in the meantime to sell your goods at the highest price and at the cheapest, and so on. Best goods at cheapest price, and our industries will be starving. So it could not be allowed, and therefore, well, the debt was waived. Well, that is the genesis. Now, from that, now the basis has come that economic life of the vanquished or the defeated nation was not to be ruined for generations. Now, the new principle has emerged. It has a radical change in the attitude. The shattered life of defeated nation has to be helped to stand on its own feet by economic help from the victors. And it seems almost as my friend who was in the ministry of East African government, in the cabinet of the East African government, one of my friends was there, Indian. He was the only Indian, Asian there, in fact. And he said, now it's the day of the defeated, the day of the poor. Because those who have something to give are competing with each other and saying, we want to give, we want to give. And it's the day of the one who they have not have the day. He said, it is he who has to choose who will give him. Almost it is coming to that, he said. You see, because the African nations also, the same. Who is going to? They say, but I can give you. He said, no, I'll take from him. It is like that, you see. Well, it is. And now the idea of helping even the underdeveloped nations to make economic progress has become a dynamic factor in international life. It may be that it is due to self-interest and enlightened self-interest, or to fear that the poor nations would offer easy ground for communism. But the fact is significance of the growing feeling of unity of mankind. There is no doubt that it is moving towards the unity of mankind. A recent withdrawal of the French and British armies, which I already told you about, you see, from the Suez Canal area, shows that powerful, imponderable factors like world opinion have now become active and dynamic and successful. It is a sign of the increasing dynamic character which the unity of mankind is gradually achieving. You see, it is becoming dynamic slowly. The Bhudan movement, sponsored by Vinoba Bhave in India, is a practical effort to live the religion of humanity in actual conditions of life in India today. You see, it points this because he puts into practice the motto of Indian religion: the whole humanity is one family. It is called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's the phrase, you see. The phrase is, the world is a family. In short, one world is the inspiring idea. And in a conservative country like England, even like in a conservative country, the movement of Vinoba has found an echo. Under the leadership of men like Russell, even Russell has taken to it and says, well, we will oppose the armament or the the atom experiment by resorting to passive resistance. Well, you see, the nations that taught may also sometimes something to learn. You see, it shows the level of international life is rising from military and economic factor to ethical ideals. That's all. It doesn't matter whether it succeeds or fails, but it shows that the level is rising from military and economic to an ethical level. Values in international life are being transformed, and the whole trend brings human unity nearer and nearer. The form of unity of mankind is which is likely to take has been dealt with by Sherman, and we have gone through that. You see, so I won't take time. Empires and so on, their forms have been going through. Now, we will come to the present form, and we see that the UNO is the present form in which some sort of machinery is provided, and it becomes an international platform to prevent a clash. It gives vent to, it gives a place for a platform to go and vent your grievances, to give your rationale, to try to put your point of view, and also perhaps take an occasion to understand the other man's point of view, not always to take for granted that the other man has no point of view. You see, there may be another point of view also. Now, that is its utility and its service. And it is divided now into two parts, political, social, and cultural. You see, the Social Security Council and the one, and the UNESCO, as you call it, the cultural portion of the movement of the UN. The second, cultural, seems the more important part of the two. Rather than the political and security council, the more important part is the social, cultural, and the educational, program of the UNO, which brings the human unity nearer by evoking psychological factors. You see, it stresses the unity of mankind in practice for promoting human unity. The constitution is not yet perfect, particularly because of the oligarchic element retained by the veto or by the five powers. And as we said, it had some justification when it started it, but now there seems to be no justification for retaining it. And voluntary surrender of the veto by one or more of the great powers would certainly go a long way in creating the psychological atmosphere which is necessary for the unity of mankind to become a fact of psychology. The splitting up into ideological groups and each group getting busy with canvassing support at the UNO for its own policy or own ideology, has come in the way of this realizing of this inner unity. And possibility of the world state, we have tried to see the pros and cons of the world state. And we have tried to see that rather than a world state in which everything would be regimented, even Lord Attlee has given voice to that necessity of organizing a world state now. He says that mankind is ready and it's high time for establishing the world state because sovereignty of nation is already being restricted, and there are problems which arise when nation is not allowed to act freely, which have to be tackled by some higher authority and actively, not merely by passing opinion, by enforcing some judgment or enforcing decisions. And therefore, he says that time is ripe for world state. Now, that indicates the one direction in which the effort can be made, but he regards this possibility of several forms and not a world state only. We have seen that. And he is in favor of, a loose union of or federation of nations in which a constitution would come into being, giving it a sufficient power to enforce its decision without becoming a hidebound world state. You see, drive towards human unity, if it can be, one can move in harmony with the intention of nature without waste of time, energy, and material, then much waste of time and material could be avoided if the psychological factors could be brought into existence. A federation of diverse nations with common aims and conventions without a rigid constitution. The first task of such an organization would be to make peace secure in the world. That's one. And that might require control of national armaments or complete or partial disarmament. The idea of one world, one humanity would have to be stressed frequently till it gets established and becomes a common part of the psychology of majority of mankind today. That is itself a great and difficult task. The sovereignty of nations, would also present a formidable difficulty to the formation of active unity of mankind. Unity of mankind and sovereignty of nation can never go together, and nations will have to reduce their sovereignty to a considerable extent. And even the question has been raised by Aurobindo in his book whether the nation unit would ultimately remain when the unity of mankind became achieved in international life. But it is possible that before the world state comes into existence effectively, national egoism might create situations for world strife and put off the day. Patriotism also might have to be given up. And such a concentration of all the power in a world state, which would become center of military, economic, and all other administrative power, the fear is it might become dictatorial in time, and it will do very little room for national freedom and even for the freedom of man's mind. Well, one would question in face of all these difficulties whether it is not going to be achieved at all. And prospect is not so bleak as we have several times worked out. It is necessary to take count of all the contingent factors and possibilities and difficulties when we think about a problem. The crux of the difficulty is that a radical change is necessary in human nature if unity of mankind is to be established on the true basis. And Aurobindo says that the question is of converting an animal collectivity into a divine collectivity. That is the problem. And man is an animal collectivity, and how to convert it into a divine collectivity. Man has failed to live up to his religion in the life of the past. And if mankind today can make a religion of humanity and live it in the life, then unity of mankind would be attained much sooner. World is already one. As Mother has several times stressed, that world is not to be created one. World is already one. It is mankind is also one. Unity of mankind is not to be created. It is already there. Only man has to become conscious of it and make it a living reality in his thought and actions. We have the religion of mankind, and about it I have already told you and quoted Aurobindo long passage. In the last century, some thinkers and poets accepted this religion of mankind, and it was a minority at that time. And some of the writers, expressed it in some of their philosophies and poems. Leigh Hunt's poem, if you remember, Abu bin Adam, may his tribe increase, rose one day from a deep dream of peace and saw within the moonlight an angel, making it look like an angel writing in the book of gold. Right? What writest thou? On the names of those who love the Lord, and is mine one? Nay, replied the angel, and so on. You remember that poem? Yes, write me as one who loves his fellow men. The angel wrote and disappeared. And when it came next day, well, lo, bin Adam's name, Abu's name, led all the rest, is it not? Well, that was the expression of the religion of mankind, you see. Now, in India, before several centuries, in Yoga Vasishtha, this was expressed in a small couplet in Sanskrit. Yen kena prakarena yasya kasyapi dehina santosham janayedrama tadev ishwar pujanam. You want to know, Vasishtha is teaching Rama. This is the man telling in the name of Rama and Vasishtha, you see, but somebody like X, Y, or Z is expressing it. And he says, you want to know how to worship God? Well, he says, by whatever means to satisfy a human being, of any human being, embodied being, if you can lead him to satisfaction, it's the highest worship of God. That is written in the Yoga Vasishtha in India, you see. And the religion of humanity means the growing realization that there is a secret spirit and a divine reality in which we are all one. That humanity is the highest present vehicle on earth, and that human race and human beings are the means by which it will progressively reveal itself here. It implies a growing attempt to live out this knowledge, to bring about a kingdom of this divine spirit upon earth. But its growth within us, by its growth within us, oneness with our fellow men will become the leading principle of all our life, not merely a principle of cooperation, but a deeper brotherhood, a real and inner sense of unity and equality and a common life. There must be the realization by the race that only on the free and full life of the individual can its own perfection and permanent happiness be founded. There must be to a discipline and a way of salvation in accordance with this religion. That is to say, a means by which it can be developed by each man within himself so that it may be developed in the life of the race. That end of the of our study of collective life so far as the idea of human unity is concerned.
Did you say there was some of the human cycle in there too? Is there also some of the human cycle?
Yeah, no, human cycle, no, this is only from human ideal of human unity. Human cycle you will take up perhaps in a short time, I don't know when. You might take up early. It will take about 4 to 6 sittings, perhaps. If you go fast on it, you see, if you fly.
The public opinion is now dynamic. One. And the slogan was, the world is one family. And passive resistance, was the slogan. And everyone, there was much respect for India because she lived up to that. But of course, Krishna is the firecracker that
Yes.
blows the works all
But
up.
he never believed it, I think. He never believed it.
No,
I don't think.
But the point is that the public image that was being built up and the sympathy and support, that people were respecting India. You're a better man than I am because you can live up to this and we can. And then go up, kind of knock the tops out. And I saw the paper that the national government sent out explaining that they almost had to do this in a way because of saying China looked people. So I understand the problem, but how do you explain to the public the psychology that is still true, that is still true of India?
The public didn't understand in the beginning, did they, about Goa? I mean, it was a colonial.
Yes. That
Gone ages ago.
Well, I
We didn't understand that.
But you see, they jumped on this one word, nonviolence and violence, and the public misunderstood it. It's a case of ignorance of the public.
you see, also of interested politicians, you see.
Yeah.
It's not merely public. Public would easily understand, but it is the politicians whose interest it is to see that they make capital out of something which they think is worth the trial. You see, I don't think that there was anything serious about. Well, I heard somebody put it very well in India that the men killed in the occupation of Goa are less than people who die by motor accident in America
Yes, well, I'm sure that's true.
in a day.
Well,
You see, yeah, that is the one thing. And secondly, if there was real opposition, then there would have been a good fight.
yes.
That there was a public opinion there already, which was favorable. Otherwise, you can't walk into another territory and simply go as if it was a procession. You see, it was more or less like a procession.
Well, it wasn't, it weren't the
It is the Goans who pointed out where there was, the bombs in the ground and, the ground was mined and everything. They said, this bridge is destroyed, don't go by this way, please go by the other way. And so on is the Goan people who pointed out, and within 3 days, the whole thing was over. It didn't take more than 3 days. On the third day, it was over. Finished. There was nothing left.
Well, the Goans wanted to be, they were Indian.
And he sent army purposely, this president of the Portuguese Republic, Salazar, you see, he sent purposely a large contingent to rake up some incident and to show that Nehru cannot live up to his declaration. That's all. And he also wanted to test how far NATO would go with him. And if NATO would precipitate a struggle on that basis, because they had air bases there. big airbase, disproportionate to Goa's requirement. Something like an international airbase, Goa is only hardly 80 square miles. He doesn't require that airbase at all. And then the more and more army he poured in just to create an incident, you see, and to create a situation in which he would be able to say, you see, look here, he can't do what he says, and NATO would have helped, he thought. He banked on that also, and there he failed. He found that that support is not coming because imperialism is a gone force. You see, we have already seen it is a force that is three big forces are against it. It can't win, and he doesn't see the current of time. This is the most unfortunate thing that happens to dictators. They cannot see the time. See, Aurobindo in the First World War had a vision when the war actually broke out. Very remarkable, you see. Two cliffs, mountain, sharp cliffs, and strong breeze was blowing through the jagged mountain, two sharp cliffs. And two eagles were going against it, you see. And they were being thrown back by the powerful breeze that was passing through that. You see the tornado, you see the current that was there. And they were thrown back and they couldn't go. When he came back, when the war was on, you see, afterwards, he said that before the war broke out, just at the time of outbreak of the First World War, so that Austria and Germany, you see, were the two eagles that were trying to go against the current of what was coming, you see, from, and they couldn't go against it because they beaten back. Well, that is what dictators do very often. They go against the current, and simply it is only to create among their own group the true consciousness. It will end by changing Portuguese mentality. It's not a loss. Ultimately, in the last sum total, it will be a gain because Portuguese will have to change. They will have to give. In fact, they have a difficulty now their own. The army, you see, the navy unit that was being diverted to America, is it not? Was it not diverted to America or Congo?
Not Congo, but that war in awful, terrible thing that's going on in Africa. They're just beating down the natives.
Yes. Oh, no, but one navy unit was diverted by the revolutionaries and taken to this Belgian Congo. Yes.
You see that Aurobindo felt that there are cases where nonviolence wouldn't be a practical thing.
No, he didn't believe in nonviolence as a creed. He believed nonviolence as a good policy when large masses are concerned and you can organize mass resistance. But he did not believe in nonviolence as an active international policy. It was always reserved, and you can read in the evening talks and in number of criticism of Gandhi, in fact. It's only a man of that dimension who can say like that in the situation in India, because Gandhi was one force that swept all over, and he said there is a reservation. You cannot. Gandhi's son came to Pondicherry. I put that in interview I named him also, Devdas Gandhi, who died the other day, 5 years back. He came. He was only young at that time, and he came and interviewed him in 1919 or somewhere thereabout. And he said that, what is your idea about non-violence? He said, yes, I am for it. But I know that it cannot be applied in present situation of world and human nature today. So he said, but it is successful because Gandhi was applying it. And one or two points in India, he had successfully done in Bihar and in Kerala district and so on. So he said, that is all right because the British are a cultured race. And they have a value, they want to keep a good name in international life. They want to be considered good people. Then he said, look, I give you one instance. If Afghans ever invaded India, what would you do with non-violence? If the Afghans invaded India, what would you do with your non-violence to resist? Okay, the first thing they would do is to take up the man who promotes non-violence, put him on the tree till he dries. Tie him with a rope, not even kill him. Well, if that is done, or if German occupied a new country, the first thing they would do for a nationalist is put him against the wall and shoot him. And they wouldn't mind using machine gun. If you say you are Mahsis, well, they've got machine guns which can mow down Mahsis. So then where will be your resistance?
Well, this is the
And
point
Pakistan,
I
the
want to
problem
bring
in
out.
Pakistan.
Huh?
Pakistan, they couldn't also apply nonviolent.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
in
yes,
Pakistan.
yes, yes.
Well, they can't go against China either.
One thing about Kashmir, why is it that India so opposes free election of the people in Kashmir?
Free elections are being done in Kashmir. Free elections are actually being done in Kashmir. The third election is there now. It is the National Assembly that voted joining India. And all this international, propaganda is keeping that under shade. Kashmir joined constitutionally. Kashmir had a National Assembly.
When was that? It's very recent.
No, before. The joining was done by National Assembly of Kashmir, not by King of Kashmir. King was a constitutional head at the time when he joined Indian government as an integral part of Indian Republic. So that the joining of Kashmir is most constitutional. You see, Lord Mountbatten had to say yes to it. There is a constitutional authority. It was Mountbatten at that time, and it was under his viceroyalty that Kashmir was accepted as part of India. It is because afterwards, when this was finished, when they attacked Kashmir, Kashmir was hesitating to openly say whatever it wanted to say. So they thought, Pakistan people, that Kashmir might go over to India. With that fear in their mind or doubt, they attacked. India could have very easily done what Kashmir, what Pakistan did long ago. No, India didn't do because they were not interested. They knew that there is a National Assembly which is for India. Not the king only, but the National Assembly, the nationalists in the Kashmir government. So I said, all right. And when they attacked, then Gandhi had to say, give his consent to the defense of Kashmir. It is one of those rare acts in Gandhi's own life where he has to support military action. He was asked in Delhi that whether he said, yes, you should send an army to protect Kashmir. You can't allow Kashmir to be defenseless when Kashmir wants defense. How did India go to Kashmir? Not in spite of Kashmir, by the Kashmir constitutional monarch and assembly calling Indian government, please come and protect us. That was the actual situation. And it is then that Gandhi had to give his consent and say, yes, you should comply because Kashmir wants. It's not a question of violence or non-violence, somebody asking for protection, you have to protect it by whatever force is available to, and it's only airlift that protected Kashmir. Otherwise, they would have been too late. If they were near the capital, in fact, they were near Srinagar, few miles from Srinagar, about 30 miles. It is the first coming down to the aeroplane that made them feel that they have to go back. And the whole thing is, after that, 2 elections have been held in Kashmir. Not by India government, but by Kashmir government. Their constitution was different, their laws were different, and their laws only last election, I think the Indian laws were applied to Kashmir, means judicial authority, you see. The Supreme Court of Kashmir was in Kashmir only. It is now only in the last 4 or 5 years that the Supreme Court is now in Delhi for Kashmir also. The law was integrated with India only recently. So much independence the Kashmirians had to decide their future. Their idea was that because there is a Mohammedan majority, they will vote for. This is not very true always, because some of the Mohammedans know what can happen to them now at their cost in Bengal. The Bengali Mohammedans know that the Punjabi Mohammedans are flooding the whole administrative machinery of Pakistan, and the Bengalis are nowhere. And the revenues are paid by Bengal. Major part of the revenue, you see. So that because there is one religion, it doesn't make for unity politically. So they realize that coming of the Punjab, I mean, to Kashmir would be the ruin of Kashmiris. Kashmiri Muslims know that very well. It is that is the difficulty. Crux of the difficulty is the propaganda carried by not only Pakistan but other imperial powers, including England and all other interested in in keeping up the difficulty, you see, so as to all the time see you are also something, you see, we are doing that, but you are also doing that. Otherwise, there is no justification for them. And India government is halting. My own point is that India government should not have declared at all for non-violence. If I was in the government, I wouldn't declare for non-violence. I would say that we'll try to keep peace as far as we can, but we are a government when we are going to use force when necessary. When we think that this is justice is at stake or truth is at stake, we will strike. That's the only way to protect yourself in this world today. Over declaration of good pious intention only brings out a reaction as if you were the culprit. In fact, they are the first aggressor. Who went to Kashmir first? Pakistan army. What right had they to invade Kashmir? Were they called by Kashmiris? They were not called, they attacked. And in fact, Kashmir called India to defend themselves, and now the whole position is turning down that why are you in Kashmir? But why are they in Kashmir? That is a problem.
Why didn't you get things?
Open. The blue papers are there available for anyone, and India government will send them from New York or Washington. If you want the whole Kashmir debate, you can get from UNO, and then you see the Indian standpoint of view. No, that is not correct. I am not a politician, but I know these facts because I have lived through the times. Held one election after